betrays who we are if we don't bring all of who we are into everything that we do. And so I'm a Black woman, and so I couldn't take space in a classroom and facilitate an experience of learning without being a Black woman and speaking from that perspective. For me, that's meant that even though my PhD is in political science, that my home discipline is in Black studies, it's in Pan-African studies. And the reason that my home discipline is in Pan-African studies, and that was always the only place I've ever wanted to be, is because Pan-African studies, Black studies, when I was a young girl feeling disconnected from education, it was Black studies that saved my life, like literally, you know. So I don't want to tell you my whole life story, but now that I'm not really 29, I've learned that I start telling more stories than I used to, right? So I'll just be real quick about it. So I was born in the 70s in Oakland, California. Some people call my generation Generation X. We call ourselves the hip-hop generation, but the truth about who we are, Black children of the 70s, we're the Panther Cub generation, right? So we have some real Panther Cubs, right? And then we also have folks like me. I'm from Oakland in the 70s. My parents were not members of the Black Panther Party, but were absolutely in and around the Black Panther Party. So my mother was a community other mother that taught children how to read, that participated in the free breakfast programs. And so that's the era at which I came of age. But then, or that's the era at which I was born, but I came of age in the 90s, right? And so if we think about what was happening in the 90s, crack cocaine hit Oakland especially really, really hard. And there was this kind of tearing apart of my soul. And a lot of people experienced this, right? Where you're pulled in one direction by what's imposed on your neighborhood, by what's imposed on us as Black people, but then you also have this consciousness. So my mother knew that I shouldn't go to school in Oakland because the school I was supposed to go to, this is how they set you up, right? So Manning Marable talks about how these institutions create these outcomes on purpose, intentionally, right? So I lived like walking distance from a school called Oakland High School, but I was far away from a school called Fremont High School. But I lived in an area of Oakland called Funktown. There were two kind of warring neighborhoods in East Oakland, Funktown and 69th Village. They decided to send the children from Funktown to the school in 69th Village. That school was so violent my senior year that they had to close the school down 2 weeks early because too many children had been killed coming to campus, right? So my mother knew not to send me to Fremont, so we did what a lot of people did and lie about our address, and I went to Berkeley High, which was the only high school in the country that had a Black Studies department. And so this is wrapping up the story. So I went to Berkeley High, and I was literally saved by Black Studies and the teacher there, Mr. Navies. And I sat in classrooms where I didn't go to regular U.S. history classes. We were allowed to take African American history 1 and 2. We didn't have to take regular English. We could take Black Gold English. We could take African American literature. We could take African American journalism. We could take Swahili. We could take African Haitian dance for PE. And it awakened me to who I am and to what my potential was. Not immediately, because I dropped out of high school in the 11th grade, but it planted seeds. And so for me, when I went back to school, I wound up graduating I went to independent studies and wound up graduating from high school and then went to Howard. When I went back to school, there was no question about what I would study, because for me, there was only one thing that would connect me with the process of intellectual development. And so I was an African American Studies major at Howard. And that's why I teach Pan-African Studies now, because I see in my students who I was, right? A need to connect with the intellectual process, not to be kind of imposed upon by an institution that is never invested, in fact, is opposed to black liberation. And so that's, I guess, what makes me a race scholar, but more deeply, that's why I do the kind of work that I do in the classroom.